Today we're going to talk about the passive voice in Latin. We'll start by reviewing the present passive, and then we'll go on to the imperfect and future passive. Now, to make a verb passive, we're going to use what are known as the passive personal endings. And I'm going to put them over here so that I don't have to erase them as I change tenses. So these are singular and plural in the first, second, and third persons so that we can express the same I, you, he, she, it, we, y'all, and they ideas that we have with the active ones. Just as a quick reminder, the active personal endings. So our passive personal endings are ris, or re. We'll talk about that. Tor, more, mini, like Minnie Mouse, and ntor. And you can notice that these are pretty similar to the actives. We still have an S in the second singular, a T and an NT in the third person, and more versus mus, pretty close. All right, let's apply this to the present tense. For our example verb today, we're going to use teneo, tenere, tenui, tentus, which is to have, or to hold. Don't confuse it with habeo like I just did. So teneo is to hold versus habeo is to have. Just like in the active, we're going to use that second principal part to create our present stem. So we will remove the RE and just use tene. Now let's set this up. In the active, we're pretty familiar with this. We would see teneo, tenes, tenet, tenemos, tenetis, tenent, to be I hold, you hold, he, she, or it holds, we hold, y'all hold, and they hold. This should feel pretty familiar by now. But let's make it passive. And to do that, we'll replace those OST, mustis, and endings with the passive personal endings. So we will have teneor, teneris, tenetor, tenemor, tenemini, and tenentor. And let's look at those translations. So, I, instead of I am holding, I am being held. Teneris, you are being held. For space, I'm just going to say, he is being held. But she, it, or another noun would be valid. Tenemor, we are being held. Tenemini, y'all are being held. And tenentor, they are being held. Notice that passive translations have this key word, being. This emphasizes that the subject is getting verbed. So, it's not that I am holding the marker. It's that the marker is being held by me. Now, I am being held by myself, which would use tene or, as well as a reflexive pronoun, which we'll learn later. All right, let's apply this to the other tenses. We're going to be able to reuse that same present stem. So I will leave it in place. As we move on to the imperfect tense. As we remember, the imperfect tense is translated was or were and uses that infix ba. And it's going to keep doing that. So let's fill in all those ba's. Now I'm using the long marks, but remember that is not something that I'm expecting you to do. I'm just doing it for practice. We've got all of our ba's showing this is imperfect. And then, while we could do bom, ba, spot, bom, spot is bomt, to say I was holding, you were holding, he, she, it was holding in the active, we're going to apply those passive personal endings instead. So bar, baris, bator, bamor, bamini, and bontor. All right, and let's look at the translations. We're going to run out of room just a little bit, so let's write them underneath instead. So tene bar would be I was being held. Tene baris, you were being held. Tenebator, she or he or it was being held. Then tenebamor, we were being held. Tenebamini, y'all were being held. And tenebontor, they were being held. So notice in all of these instances, I'm still using that being helping verb to indicate that the subject is getting verbed because this is a passive verb. So the marker was being held, by me. The candies were being held by the children, but then they ate them. We can also still use these with any person. So, y'all were being held at the starting line before the race started. All right, and we're almost there. Let's look at those future forms. Again, we're still going to use that same present stem where you go to the second principal part, remove the RE. So I'm going to leave those tenays up, though I might write the third plural one again because I partially erased it with my hand. Yeah. We'll give all of these a new run. All right. There we go. All right. And for the future tense, again, we're going to use the same basic rules that we're used to from the active. That means the bow, bibby, bibby, boo infixes, and the translation will. So let's fit in those infixes. We've got bow, bi, bee, bi, bee, boo. So if this was active, we would have bow, bis, bit, bimos, bitis, bunt, using those active endings, but instead we're using the passive personal endings, which gets us bore, and then a quick exception, bi is going to change to an e, bearis, bitor, bimor, bimini, oh no, and buntor. And then our translations are going to use the will, that shows its future, and the being, that shows its passive. So our first translation would be, I will be held. Varus, you will be held. Bitor, he, she, or it will be held, just like this marker will be held by me the next time that I teach a lesson. Bimor, we will be held. Bimini, y'all will be held. And buntor, they will be held. And there you have it. I know this was a lot of information, so it might be helpful to watch it a couple times and pause in between sections. We will be using all of these verb forms quite a bit in the next few weeks, so you will get lots of practice. Have a great day.